I have but one question. What in the world is this game? The hummingbird, or Trochilidae, is a species of avian creatures known best for its small size, narrow nectar-drinking beaks, rapid wing flap rate, and ability to shoot lasers. Wait, they didn't teach you that in school? Well, that's because you didn't go to the Ed Annunziata School of Strange and Bizarre Extraterrestrial Fighting Superpowered Animals that inadvertently saved the world. I wouldn't expect you to. It's a pretty exclusive school. In the winter of 1992, Echo the Dolphin became one of the oddest and most cryptic titles to ever land on the Sega Genesis. Created by Mr. Annunziata, Echo was developed by Appaloosa Interactive, then known as Novotrade International. Somewhere down the line, I guess it was decided that another equally as cryptic adventure should also be crafted, but this time, the game would be about hummingbirds. Lo and behold, Kolibri was born just 3 years later for Sega's newest money pit gizmo, the 32X. This lethal combo produced a game that sold a limited amount of copies while being on a niche legacy peripheral, making Kolibri an expensive title to collect these days. And it's not because it's a particularly good game or anything. It's a rather average shmup with a well-detailed facade. If there's one thing that I would like to say about this game, it's that the design is definitely noteworthy. The sprites take on a unique, yet oddly photorealistic approach. There is also a consistent usage of parallax, and the color scheme is extremely vivid at times. One of the most important details of its design, however, is the box. This thing alone is one of the best things to come out of the 1990s. It should have sold more copies just because this art alone makes a great display piece. Going back to the topic of gameplay, Kolibri is reminiscent of its forerunner, Echo the Dolphin. The player takes control of a hummingbird named Kolibri and explores an open map. However, the game does occasionally shift to auto-scrolling levels from time to time. Within these levels, you are usually tasked with an objective. These can range from clearing hornets away from flowers so that you and your other thirsty mates can drink some nectar from the local flowers, or simply just making it to the end of a level and progressing with the primary goal of saving the planet. But the game doesn't tell you, so good luck. We'll cover that in a few. Along the way is a rogue's gallery of insects and other critters. Some of these are especially lethal to our little bird friend, like giant chameleons or bullfrogs that will latch on in the hopes of enjoying a tasty hors d'oeuvre.
It's in my nature.
Beyond that, some of the enemies do start to look a bit more avant-garde. And that is because we are, once again, just like Echo, dealing with aliens. When Kolibri starts, the player is simply thrust into the gameplay with no exposition, no heads-up display, absolutely nothing. I pity the poor souls that rented this game back in the day and got stuck with a rental case, because all of these finer details regarding exposition and controls are neatly tucked away on the back of the box and in the manual. Now, I'm no stranger to checking the back of the package to gain meta details needed to better play and understand the game, but to literally have your game's entire lore hidden behind reading the fine print leads me to one conclusion. This game is Dark Souls, but with birds. However, the actual plot of Kolibri is more Kirby-esque than Linking the Fire. To summarize, a long time ago, an ancient crystal was gifted to the Earth from an unknown force in the corner of the galaxy. The crystal is then embedded deep into the Earth and is the sustaining force that helps drive and create life on the planet. But a sudden plot twist. There was another crystal, an evil twin of what I guess is now considered the good crystal. And both crystals are hurtled through space for some time. While the good one eventually reached Earth, the evil one was flung into the vast emptiness where it festered and conjured up whatever evil space voodoo that dark crystals can manifest. Eventually, the evil crystal decided it was time for a family reunion and was sent spiraling to the Earth, where it began to spread its devious infection, slowly killing the planet with its evil voodoo magic. It was the night he came home. Reaching dire straits, the good crystal chooses a champion to fight back. Kolibri, our pure-hearted hummingbird, is empowered to be the cure to remove the evil crystal, which I guess leads us to the point where we chose violence and Kolibri gets the ability to shoot lasers. The Contra-like power-ups that you can equip to your bird include an array of artillery that would make Bill and Lance proud. Granted, this tends to mean players will probably gravitate towards projectiles like the scatter shot or the homing laser over what would be maybe considered weaker power-ups, like the rings or the ricochet shot. But there's at least a fun assortment available here to experiment around with based on your preferred playstyle. A strange contrast of arcade action from a game that ends up looking like an original Thomas Kincaid or Bob Ross painting. Either way, that's pretty much the whole gist of the plot. It's a somewhat generic sci-fi romp with a super original presentation. Kolibri is probably the best Hummingbird shoot-'em-up game of all time. A well-deserved commendation. Just ignore the fact that it's probably the only Hummingbird shooter that will ever exist, but that said, the margins for what is good are still pretty narrow. The game holds mostly positive reviews, with a few mixed ones also tossed in there randomly. The most scathing review probably belongs to GamePro, but even then, most of the review basically comes down to the game being just average and rather boring. Most of the cons stated about the game are centered around Kolibri's lack of intuitive controls, which I would agree with. For example, there's a consistent delay that occurs when controlling Kolibri. For a game that tries to branch into a lighter version of the bullet hell genre, a considerable degree of precision and responsiveness is absolutely mandatory. Games like Gradius would not be critically acclaimed if they had floaty or loose controls. As a byproduct of this problem, Kolibri suffers in this department, which is a little ironic if you think about it. Hummingbirds are known for their zippy, tight flight paths, so this guy should have had weapons-grade precision. Another point of note is the random difficulty spikes throughout the course of the game. Kolibri can go from being an easy-breezy walk in the park to having to fight off a deluge of enemies in the blink of an eye. This unfortunately compounds with the fact that your Hummingbird is a very brittle protagonist, usually dying in one hit unless shielded with a power-up. I guess when the good crystal decided to boost up Kolibri, it rolled its stats into being a tiny little glass cannon in the process. In typical mid-90s fashion, the game doesn't save either, which means you'll have to do a lot of password typing. Thankfully, this can be documented within the manual's flight log. I kind of get it given the nature of the game, but for the love of God, if there's one thing I despise with a great passion, it's password systems, and I am glad they are a thing of the past. Kolibri is an enigma of a game. I'm just not sure that I entirely get it. I'm not entirely sure that they, the creators, knew what they wanted their game to be. It just feels like Kolibri was a game that was created by throwing a dart at a bunch of zoo books.
Well, whoops, we already landed on dolphins and porpoises last time. Check another one.
This time, it just happened to land on hummingbirds instead.
Wait, how do we make that interesting?
I don't know, give it guns.
And boom, Kolibri was made. I feel like the developers did intend to promote a sort of ecological or conservationist message within Kolibri. The game's manual even includes a bizarre section on amazing facts about hummingbirds, as well as some additional references to specific educational texts. I definitely think that there was a bigger worldly message at play here. It's too bad that it wasn't more specifically executed. If all of these strangely disjointed bonus features don't paint a vivid picture of how all over the place Kolibri is, I don't quite frankly know what else could. At its best, Kolibri is a decent shoot-'em-up adventure game with an interesting protagonist and some very cool music and level designs. The game is absolutely fueled by its distinct atmosphere, one that you cannot find in any other adventure game outside of course, the Echo the Dolphin games. But consequentially, and at its worst, Kolibri can be a dull, repetitive shooter with a strange narrative and unbalanced difficulty levels, thus leading to head-scratching puzzles, chaotic climax sequences, and a final level that is so unjustifiably long that I wanted to shut the game down halfway through the level sequence. Outside of the hardcore collecting scene, the price for Kolibri, for most, would be unjustifiably high for the middling game experience that it provides. I don't see the game ever coming digitally to any other platforms due to its relative obscurity and the general lack of demand for 32X games. But hey, if this video has compelled you to give it a shot, I'm sure you can find ways to experience it, thanks to the magic of the internet, of course. Just be sure to not expect too much from the game. This one is definitely for the birds.